I have to record. I'm always forgetting to record our sessions. So we're going to spend 15 or 20 minutes just kind of running through and looking at what the D, the I, the S, and the C actually stand for, and what that looks like, what it all means. It's all about behavior. And so these are just the four dominant styles of behavior that most human beings exhibit in some way, shape, or form. And then we'll spend the tail end of our time together really kind of honing in on how do you use this to help you be a better you? How do you use this information to help you get a handle on your day? How do you use this information to help you figure out what kind of a schedule works best for you? And then we'll finish by just hitting a couple of strategies and pointers on how you use this with potential clients. And somewhere in there, we'll throw in working with team members and or employees for those of you who have that going on as well. So let me just send this off to Rachel. Are there any specific questions while I'm doing this? Are there any specific questions that any of you on the call have that you want to make sure we get answered before we finish today, as it relates to the DISC or behavior? No? Okay. And if more of you, since there's only 16 of us today, if more of you want to open up your cameras like the brave 4 or 5 and let me see your lovely face. Thank you, Jody and Andrea and George and Chris and Marvin. See, as soon as you guilt people, they start now. Okay, there's Federico and Lyria. I love all that. So, and I get it if you haven't showered or you're like in your PJs and you want to stay hidden. I get it. It's all good. One of the things that Gary made sure that he showed us in that last Zoom call was that he was not only wearing pants but shoes and socks. We got a complete tour of Gary's entire outfit because he wanted to make sure no one thought, there we go, see, Jody's wearing shoes as well. So do take out this document that I sent, and we're going to run through this to outline for you the D, the I, the S, and the C, and what that all means. As I said before, it's a simple measure of behavior, right? This was developed by Dr. Abelson, who is the kind of the guru of the DISC. He's not necessarily the guru of behavior, but he's the guru of the DISC, and we utilize his assessments to make sure that we get the most accurate information for any of you who are utilizing this. Oh, and you know what? Someone remind me at the very end. I will. I'll have to run and get it because I don't think I brought it. I'll give you the link so that if you've never run a DISC on yourself, you can go and run that DISC. The results all filter to me. Don't let that frighten you. They all filter to me, and I'll just pass that off to you. And if you want to have a conversation over the course of the next week or so about what those results look like, I'm happy to do that with you. So I think the best thing to do is to just kind of dive right in and start with, let's start in that upper left-hand corner with the high D, right? Let's describe that high D. So the high D, their main goal when they get up in the morning, if you look right under where it says high D dominance, is to do what? Conquer, right? They are out to conquer. They are out to climb the mountain. They are out to win every single morning. And P.S., I just want to say, Andrea, that painting on the wall behind you is awesome. What is that? Hold on, you're muted. Hold on. Go for it.
So I met this artist in Florida. That's where I live. And he's a Cuban artist, and he's local, and he just does the most amazing, colorful stuff that is just gorgeous.
Yeah, I love it. It makes me smile.
All right, wait. You have to see this one then, because this is going to make you smile even more.
Oh, that's awesome. It reminds me of hearts, flowers, and tortillas all at the same time.
Yeah, it's really special. Anyway, thanks
Beautiful,
for
beautiful.
thanks for the input.
Certainly. So the high D wakes up every morning setting out to conquer, right? The key words that describe a high D, what do you think? There are a bunch of D words.
Driver.
Yeah, driver. What else? Direct,
Dominant.
right? Dominant. There are a couple that are less appropriate, but sometimes they're used to describe us.
Aggressive.
Right? Yes, let's go with aggressive, Chris. Let's go with that one because that's the A version of the D word that I was thinking of, right? So you have all of these words that describe that high D who gets up every morning to conquer something. The key emotion of that high D, key emotion for most high D personalities, anger. Anger as a key emotion. And that's not to say that that high Ds are always angry. That's not what that means. What it means is they use frustration and anger and an inability to be satisfied as fuel to continue their quest, to keep pushing forward, to continue that conquering idea that they woke up with in the morning. They're motivated by two things. Challenge, right? The high D is that one who says, okay, don't tell me I can't do that. Right? When you say to a high D, yeah, I'm not sure you're gonna be able to accomplish that. They just want to make sure that they prove you wrong and get it done faster than you ever thought possible. Right? So they're motivated by a challenge and the bottom line. Now that can be viewed as a financial bottom line, and yet you also have to look at bottom line in a broader sense as well. Right? They want to cut the chit chat. They want to cut the BS. They want to get to the point. Right? There's that version of bottom line as well. The motto for the high D is I will do it. I will do it. Right? You tend to hear high D personalities or high D behavioral styles saying some things, things like, you know what, I don't have time to train anybody else. It's easier if I just do it by myself. Right? They also tend to say, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Right? Because their whole mantra in their world is, I'll just do it. I'll just get it done. Right? The dominant fear of a high D personality or high D behavioral style, two things. Number one, being taken advantage of. And number two, wasting time. See, you know, it's interesting, as a high D behavioral style myself, I look at that and think to myself, well, yeah, of course, those two things are related. I look at being taken advantage of as a subset of wasting time. Like wasting time I look at wasting time as a subset of being taken advantage of. If you're wasting my time, that is a version to me of you kind of pulling the wool over my eyes and saying, okay, you said this was an important conversation. It's not, right? We could have had this on the phone in 3 minutes. And so that all of a sudden feels like being taken advantage of, at least to me. And I'll tell you, if you are a high D behavioral profile, that idea of really understanding that the fear for you is being taken advantage of, that was a very clarifying moment in my life when I learned that. Like, oh, that's why I feel that way all the time. Right? That's why I have to always battle in my own head about what are people's true motives. Like the world is not actually all out to get me, right? It's just that fear that lives inside of that driver of wasting time or being taken advantage of. And let me just stop there a second and reference that when we talk about the fears of each of these four styles, that's like at people's core. It's what they're afraid of, not in an external manner. It's really an internal fear. It's kind of what's part of their DNA, right? So you have that picture right now of that high D behavioral style, that dominant, driven, aggressive person who is motivated by challenge and a bottom line, who fears being taken advantage of and wasting time, whose mantra is "I will do it," and whose key emotion is anger. If you close your eyes, if that doesn't describe you, I'm certain that you can picture someone in your world that does describe. Now, here's the part of the session that we just stop a second and say, remember that behavior is not right or wrong. It just is. There is no better behavior to be. There's just people who are more dominant in the D or the I or the S or the C or two of them, right? We're going to talk about combining those in a little bit. And there is no right or wrong. Just remember that behavior is just behavior. It's the understanding of behavior that we're looking to get at, not necessarily the validation one way or the other. So let's move to the high I. That's that upper right-hand corner. And so the high I, you can see the key word there is influence, right? Influence. And they wake up every morning with the idea that they are going to persuade people. They're going to persuade people. They're the persuaders. They're the influencers. They're the I'm on a fun bus. Let's get on the bus together. Let's do it, right? That high I personality, their key emotion, optimism. Optimism. I will tell you that one of the categories of a team leader, one of the behavioral styles we look for in a team leader is that high I, right? Because high I's generally have good people skills. They're good people. And one of the things one of my jobs with our team leaders is to always temper that optimism, right? Because high I's come with a lot of optimism. And so my job is to make sure that when they come to a business meeting and are reporting numbers or they're reporting projections or whatnot, to ask a bunch of questions around that to make sure that their optimism hasn't taken over. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean I crush their optimism out of them. That's not the point, right? But it is my job to make sure that I remind them and ask them some questions about, okay, how real is that? Or is that an optimistic view of what we're talking about? They're motivated by, the high I is motivated by recognition, right? Recognition is a key factor for the I behavioral style. I will tell you, not being much of an I myself and being in business with high I's, I have to constantly remember that high I's do look for recognition, right? Because that, for me personally, that is not important to me at all. I'm not interested in the pat on the back. I'm not motivated by that, right? And yet when you're in business, when you're someone who's not motivated by that and you're in business with someone who is, and this is an important business discussion as well, in that if you are not a high I personality and you have sellers who might be a high I personality, well, those sellers, they like recognition. They want you to say, great job when they've prepared the house well for a showing. You know, if they've shared some pictures, summer pictures of the pool when it's open because you're listing it in February, they want the thank you. They want the recognition. You know, so you have to remember that people who are of that high I behavioral style, they want to be noticed and they want to be recognized, and it's important for you to feed that in them, or else you start to have some some contentiousness, right? The mantra of the high I, they're kind of more the cheerleader, right? You can do it. Go, 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 woo, woo, woo. Right? So the high I is really more that cheerleader whose mantra is you can do it. And the high I fears, more than anything else, rejection. The high I fears rejection. Some words that describe the high I: influencer, effusive, bubbly, like that life of the party, everybody's friend, right? That's that person. Highly relationship oriented. So again, if that doesn't describe you per se, I'm certain you can close your eyes and picture someone that describes, right? High I's typically have a lot of energy, and they're not afraid to share it with everybody, right? The high D also comes with a lot of energy, and yet it's a more internal energy. It's a more, leave me alone and let me get my work done type energy, right? Than it is the, hey, how's it going? How was the weekend? What's going on, right? That's the difference between so two behavioral styles, both high energy. One's more of an introverted energy, and one's more of an extroverted energy. So one of the things that we'll touch on before we finish is, how do you tell who you're talking to, right? You're not going to necessarily give your seller an assessment, right? Although it would be spectacular if we made that part of our listing paperwork. If you could just take this quick 20-minute assessment so we understand exactly who you are and how you prefer to be dealt with. And yet you can start figuring out if your seller is high energy. Well, already you're probably dealing with a D or an I, and less so an S or a C, right? And then you just have to kind of wade through whether they're more of an introverted or extroverted energy type person. And in conversation, we'll give you some questions to ask a little later on to help you nail things down. So that's the D and the I. Let's move to the S. So the lower right-hand corner of your page. The high S, you can see they are defined by steady and stable. As a matter of fact, those are two words that you can count on with the high S. And they wake up every single morning to be supportive. The high S is kind of all about everybody else. The key emotion for the high S, it's an interesting one, because the key emotion for the high S is that the high S tends to hide their emotions, because they are more about others than they are about themselves. And so their emotions tend to be less important, and they'd rather recognize what's going on with you than show up with their own kind of style going on. So the key emotion for the high S is that they tend to hide their emotions. Now, the healthy high S may just hide them. The unhealthy high S may shove them down and just decide that they're not valid, right? So there's a health issue to be addressed there as well. The high S is motivated by benefits. And again, what that really means is it's more benefits for others, benefits to others around them, than it is benefits for themselves. The mantra for the high S: now that I understand, I can help you do it. Right? So it's about an understanding. It's about offering assistance. It's, again, that supportive foundation that they come from. And the high S, this is a really important one for something I'm going to tell you just in a few minutes. The high S fears change the most. They fear change. So again, from a business perspective, if you have a buyer or a seller that is a high S, and their main fear is change, I'm curious, has anyone ever sold a house to either a buyer or for a seller where there wasn't a ton of change going on? Right? The very definition of what we do is we facilitate change. And so if you have clients who are that high S behavioral style, can you see that might be a struggle for them? Can you see that recognizing that high S behavioral style, that it might not be about, we get so frustrated with sellers sometimes where it seems like they don't get it. Like, why won't they just reduce the price? Like, what don't they see? It's so clear. Well, they see all of that. They're just stuck in that fear of change. They know that the second they reduce the price, someone's going to buy their house. And now that change that they've been trying to stave off for the last 3 months in getting the house sold and actually moving on becomes real for them. And so there are real reasons based on someone's behavioral profile that their behavior starts to show up in what we do and what we attempt to help them with. Some keywords for the high S, we said before: steady, stable, supportive, loyal, patient. I like to think of the high S's as the softer side of Sears. All right, let's talk about the high C, and then we'll put it all together. The high C, again, so these are the compliant people in our worlds. They wake up every single morning with the main goal of avoiding conflict. Right? These are not your conflict folks. Right? They look to avoid conflict at all costs. The key emotions for the high C: fear and being risk averse. These are the worriers. These are the folks that, that they're the detail folks, right? And which we're going to get to in a second. They are the detail folks, and so they live in that spot of being very risk averse. They fear. They have a fear based on the want to be right and correct, right? And it's not being right like a D or an I, right? Who just kind of wants to be right to prove a point. This is being right from a correctness perspective, from a this is the way it's supposed to be perspective, right? The high C is motivated by correctness. Depending on how high the C might be, it's correctness to the point of perfection. Now, can you see that with a high C, that motivation to be right and to be so right that it's perfection, can you see how that can be a stumbling block for some of those people? Right? So again, when you look at working with a buyer who's a ragingly high C, they're looking for perfection. They're looking for everything to be right. And what do we know about the perfect house? Does it exist? It does not, right? It doesn't exist. And so when you're marrying some behavioral foundational points with what we do you see where some of the sticking points might be, right? I will tell you that sometimes you have people who are a little bit of both, right? And that gets kind of crazy. I will tell you my own behavioral style is I'm a really high D and a really high C, right? So that DC personality, there's a clinical description of that. It's called schizophrenia, right? Because the high D in me wants to wake up every morning and just get it done and just go, go, go. But the high C in me wants to make sure everything is always done perfectly. And so those two things, it's hard for all that to live in the same body, right? And so what you learn once you understand yourself a little better, I have to know when to pull that C down and when to allow it to come up. And what I find is that C for me sometimes stands in my way, and I have to ask myself the question: okay, is 80% good enough to pull the trigger? Because naturally, I want to get to that 100%. I want to be 100% certain. And so I had a coach once say to me, you know what, your problem is you're waiting for 100%. What if 80% is good enough? What if you're missing opportunities by having to get to that 100% perfection spot? Right, so the mantra of the high C: I will do it correctly, no matter how long it takes. Right? So it's still that I will do it, but it's I will do it correctly, no matter how long it takes. Because again, they are driven by that, that correctness. By the way, as a DC, I'm in really good company because Gary Keller is a DC. Tony DeCillo is a DC. So a lot of awesome people in our company are also DCs. So you got a lot of crazy kind of working out in this organization. The fear of the high C, the main fear of the high C, being wrong, that shows up sometimes via criticism, right? C's don't like to be criticized. They don't like to be wrong. And the key words that describe the C, we talked about it before: compliant, conflict averse, accurate, detail-oriented. I call C's the charts and graphs people, right? They love Excel. C's love Excel. If you can have a conversation and somehow put it in a chart, oh my goodness me, the high C's love that, right? So again, from the perspective of you using this as a business tool, if you know you have someone sitting across from you who exhibits the signs of that high C personality, you want to make sure that you have charts and graphs to supplement your conversation. The high C kind of wants you to prove it, right? With something that you've created or printed from someplace that can give them follow-up detail. And then of course the high I, if those charts and graphs are full of pretty colors, the high I is drawn to the pretty colors, right? And so now you're kind of two birds with one stoning it, right? It's why some of the things that we push your way, like the Brokermetrics supply and demand chart, for the D's and the C's, it's great additional information to prove that you know what you're talking about. And for the high I's, they just are attracted to the colors, the red lines and the blue lines and the green lines, right? So you see how all this starts to fit together. So now let me give you just a couple of ways to pull all this together, and then we'll move forward. So across the top, I want you to write, that's the D's and the I's. So right across the top, outside of the box, I want you to write fast and aggressive. Fast and aggressive. Those two styles tend to be faster and more aggressive. It's why when someone says, well, what's the perfect behavioral profile for a salesperson? The answer is there isn't a perfect profile for anything. Anyone can succeed, right? I think Gary's done pretty well for himself in real estate, right, as a DC. And yet, generally speaking, we look for, in a sales position, you look for some version of strength on the D side and some version of strength on the I side, because you want those people, those relationship skills of the I, but you also want the drive and the let's get it doneness, the aggressiveness of the D. Across the bottom, I want you to write steady and cautious. So the S's and the C's tend to show up more on the steady and cautious side. Across the left-hand side of your paper, which should be the DC side, I want you to write task-oriented. Task-oriented. You might even write task-oriented / results-oriented, right? The D's and the C's are more about the steps of the process to get to a result. On the right-hand side, that's the IS side, I want you to write people / relationship oriented. Because the I's and the S's are all about relationships. They're all about the people side of things. Now, if you were to, you see right here in the middle of your page, kind of where the, hold on, let me come around. Where where you have the little cross here where the up and the down axis kind of meet. I want you to write in each of the corners for each of these four styles. I want you to write a speed and a temperature, because there's a speed and a temperature that goes along with each of these four styles as well. And so in the corner of the D, from a speed perspective, I want you to write fast. And from a temperature perspective, I want you to write cold, right? So fast and cold would describe the D. On the I, in the corner of the I want you to jot down fast and hot. Right, so both the D and the C tend to move fast. However, from a temperature perspective, and what I mean by temperature is how others kind of experience them, right? D's, people tend to experience them in a colder fashion, and I's tend to be experienced more in a hotter fashion in terms of peopleness. For the S in that corner, from a speed, I want you to write slow. And from a temperature, I want you to write warm. Right? S's tend to show up a little more slowly, and yet there's a warmth about them. It's that the people version of the I. It's not hot and crazy, right? It's not cha-cha-cha. Instead, it's warmth. And then on the C, I want you to write slow for speed, mostly because it takes them forever to get things done because they want to make sure they do it right? So they take extra time. And from a temperature perspective, write the word cool. Okay, and the last bit of information I'm going to give you about all these folks, I think is the most important. Now that you have an understanding of who makes up or what characteristics make up each of these four categories, I want you to write the percentage of the population that tends to fall into each of these categories. Now remember, everybody has some of each of these four in them. Some people have a lot of one and not a lot of others. Some people tend to have a lot of two show up naturally, and then less of the others. And any of us can manipulate our behavior to show up as someone different for short periods of time, right? Part of the reason that we utilize this tool in hiring is we want to know, does somebody who we're hiring to do kind of an administrative role, who really needs to have that S and that C in them, right? Maybe I and C, but I prefer an SC from an administrative role. The C because someone has to wake up with the details and the accuracy and the rule following, because I'm looking for them to do things the way I want them to be done. But also the S because they have to be able to relate to people, right? My concern about an IC in an administrative role is that the I's tend to talk way too much. And so again, I'm just talking for myself. That means then that administrator is either going to be talking too much to other people in the office and not getting things done, or worse, talking way too much to me, because I'm not necessarily all that interested in all that conversation all the time, right? So I like the SC behavioral style for administrative positions for me, because they come with the requisite natural behavioral tools. Now, can somebody who's a high D, who doesn't have a whole lot of patience and isn't all that interested in getting it done correctly, succeed in an administrative role? And so the answer is yes, for short periods of time. What I know is that if I think someone's awesome and they have too much D inside of them, that's going to end up lasting for a shorter period of time. Again, especially when I understand myself, those two high D personalities at some point are going to conflict. There's going to be contentiousness there, right? And so we utilize this information to help people understand, or to help in hiring, to know, is this person going to succeed for long periods of time? Make sense? I'll give you one more example. As a team leader, right? I was a team leader for a number of years. I only succeeded at a certain level as a team leader. Mostly that was due to the fact that I just don't have the people skills naturally to fuel a passion to want to talk to people over and over and over and over again, to really have a passion for the recruiting side of what that job entails, right? I know just enough how to manipulate my own behavior to make sure I can show up for all of you every day, right? And that takes more energy for me. Steve and Dan and Carlos, oh my God, I mean, talking to people, that fuels them, that gives them more energy. It's why they're good at what they do. Talking to people is a drain on my energy, right? Being alone fuels me. People are tougher for me. And so knowing that those roles require different things, we utilize this information to help people understand if they'll succeed or not long-term in the role. All right, let me give you the population numbers. The high S, let's start with the S in the lower right-hand corner. The high S is going to show up more than anybody else, 35%. 35% of the population, high S's, which means when you walk into somebody that you've never met before, there's a 1 in 3 chance that they will exhibit the high S behavioral profile. The next one is the C at 30%. And while we're at it, the I also at 30%. Right? So C's and I's each make up 30% of the population, with S's coming in on top at 35%. Now, if you do that math, that doesn't leave a whole lot for the high D's, right? Thank God. Only 5%. 5% of the population assess out as high D personalities. What do you think those percentages say about how you can utilize this information to list and sell more real estate? Just, if you knew nothing else about this behavior except what we went through today and how those percentages kind of eke out, what does it say for you? Because it could be different for each of you. What do you think that says for you about how you can use this information to list and sell more real estate?
I think it says, you don't want to be very aggressive and almost pushy to a point. You want to come more of a place of understanding and caring about them.
So coming from a place of care, 100%. I wouldn't lose the aggressiveness, however, because what these numbers say to me is that most people on the planet have to hire out for aggressive behavior. They have to hire out for someone to really push and drive. Now, even if that doesn't describe you naturally, your adapted style as a salesperson may be that you need to kind of pump up the D a little bit, because most of the people that you will deal with don't have it naturally, right? Many of you on this call, I know many of you well enough to know that you don't have that naturally, right? It doesn't mean you're missing something. It's just you have strengths that show up in a different place, right? I'm looking on this call, some of you are far better at people than others of you are, right? And many of you know that about yourselves, and many of you maybe don't, right? Maybe I should put in the chat box who I'm talking about. That would be fun, right? For those of you who heard, Chris, did you ever take the disc?
No, the KPA is different, correct?
It's different enough, yes.
Yeah, so no, I haven't taken the disc.
Yeah, and so one of the things that, if you were on the call this morning that where Chris was featured, one of the things that Chris was talking about was what he's learned in the last couple of weeks is how to kind of flex his muscles in being more relational than perhaps task-oriented, right? Because one of the things that Chris said, and Chris, correct me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm misspeaking, but one of the things that he said this morning was he's always kind of been into technology, right? And so technology allowed him to hide from people a little bit more. And so in the last couple of weeks, he's been way more focused on being more relational than his natural tendencies tend to allow. Do I have that right?
That's 100% correct. Yeah.
Right. And so what that could mean, right now, Chris and I don't know each other for a really long time or all that well. So this would be more of a guess for me until we have some an assessment and results. My guess is that, Chris, you show up more in the D or the C category, and on the people scale, you're probably a higher S than you are an I.
You know, this has me confused. I feel like I'm parts of all of it, so I'm curious to take this assessment. I know I wake up with the D for sure. I do not enjoy conflict. I'm also very supportive of people, and I feel like I'm probably the least wanting to persuade. Yeah,
which is, I think, pretty much exactly what I just described, right? Is that you tend to show up on the D on the C scale with that S kind of being the next one down with the least amount of I. Then that's how I experience you. And again, it that could be 100% wrong, because how you show up in the office, you know, in the days when we used to be able to come to the office, how you show up in the office may be different than how you show up in quote unquote real life. And yet that's not been my experience of most people. Most people that I recognize, that I have the experience of in the office, that's kind of just how they show up, right? There's not like office Federico and then, you know, real life Federico. There's just Federico, right? Now you, just since we mentioned Federico, you're just far more of a people person, right? Than certainly I am, right? And so from a strength perspective, you have that strength of being able to connect more with people, right? George, you have that too, right? You're just more natural in connecting with people and having conversations, whereas that stresses me out, right? That to have to meet somebody new and chat with them, I need a script for that, or else I get kind of weirded out. So understanding yourself starts to really help you see these traits in other people. I'm curious to see, we'll see how close both Chris and I came to his actual assessment results, because I think that since we both described the same person when he described himself and I described him, I'm curious to see what the assessment results come out to be and see really where he falls. Although I think that probably we both can't be wrong, right, about him. Any questions kind of globally on what we've discussed? All right, so in your packet, and we are only about 9 or 10 minutes left in the session. I will look to end just before 2 o'clock. I'm going to jump on the Gene Rivers call, and you all got the link for that yesterday. So if you're interested in Gene Rivers, do look for, I think it came from your team leaders yesterday for the Gene Rivers call, if you're jumping on that. The other pieces of paper that you received in your packet kind of go through some strategies to help you utilize the information that you have once you understand yourself a little bit better and start to see it in other people. For example, if you go to the one that looks like this, that says sales strategy planner. So the sales strategy planner kind of gives you some strategies if you are a high I, right? You need to know that in an appointment. Yes, so I think if you're in the Ridgefield Market Center, you do have an ALC meeting at 2 o'clock as well. Yes. I don't know what channel that is. You'll have to check with Dan, but you probably have that information. So if you're the high I want you to just look at some of those bullet points, right? So some of the strategies for a high I in a buyer or a seller situation, you need to use enough time to be sociable, and yet don't get stuck in discussing everyone's, where'd you get your shoes? I love your outfit. How was your vacation? How was your weekend? What are you doing next weekend, right? You could spend 30 minutes on the social stuff and not get down to business, right? So that's one of those things to realize as a high I. Another thing for a high I, remember the main fear of the high I was rejection, right? Do you think it's harder for a high I behavioral style to sit down and lead generate than some other styles, right? Of course, because you fear that rejection, right? And so when you understand that about yourself, you then get to take some steps. How do I strategize around that fear of rejection? Well, maybe you start with people you know. Maybe you start with calls that are simpler, right? For many of you, the calls that you've made in the last couple of weeks, just to call and check in and say, hi, how are you? How's your family? Is there anything I can do for you? Those have been the easiest calls you've ever made, right? Because it's about people and it doesn't really have anything to do with business. When you're that high I personality and you fear rejection, the reason you don't naturally jump to a business call is because you feel like you're putting yourself on the line to be rejected, right? And innately, that the foundation of you, your DNA says, oh, no, I think I'm not going to do that, right? So you see how some of these behavioral styles, these behavioral traits start to show up in either aiding us in what we need to do, or because the high I's, you could meet with anybody and go and sell ice to an Eskimo because you just know you have that thing about you that people will listen to you and be influenced by you, right? It's how you're getting the business that sometimes is a struggle for you. Is this making sense? I see some nodding of heads, right? So we must be hitting some nerves that make sense, right? And so I want you to go through this strategy, this sales strategy planner, once you have your results and understand who you are a little bit better. Some of you have clarity around who you are, and some of you maybe don't. So I will, and I think what I'll do is I'll just email the. I know who was on the call because I have the attendance roster. I'll just email you the link because I won't have time to run and get it and bring it back. So let me email you that link for the assessment. Once you understand better who you are, right? Say you're a high S. If you're a high S and you're sitting across the table with a seller who is not a high S, right? So again, some of these other pages give you some strategies. If you go to the S Behavioral Selling Skills page, there's some awesome strategies and tips for if you're an S who is selling to a D, right? You have to, some of the tips it talks about there is you need to make sure that you bring every ounce of confidence that you have, right? Because when the high D shows up, oftentimes the high S is a little bit more intimidated by the high D, right? They're different energy profiles. And so that high D brings that big, strong energy, and the high S brings a lower energy and a sweeter energy, and can oftentimes feel a little bit intimidated by that. So you need to, if you're that high S with a high D across the table, you need to bring that level of confidence. You need to close sooner. You have to remember that the person sitting across from you doesn't need all the reassurances that you personally do as a high S. This is someone who is like looking for the bottom line. Let's get it done fast and move forward, right? So you need to close sooner. When you're dealing with a high D across the table, you need to always take issue with the facts, not the person, right? When you take issue with the person, now that's an affront to that person, and you're in an argument, right? Take issue with the facts. If you're a high C who's dealing with a high I, right? You have to remember that it's not all about the numbers. It's not all about the details and the facts. You have to remember that you have to remember to be human, right? Because sometimes the D's and the C's forget that there's another human being across the table. It's not just a business conversation. It's a business conversation with another human being, right? And it's funny because I think sometimes my goodness, is that really true? Again, I will tell you, I am, as someone who suffers from a lack of people skills, those are things I have to remind myself. I can remember when we first opened the Ridgefield Market Center, I had someone about 2 or 3 months into that office's existence. I had someone come to me and say, "Are you mad at me?" And I said, "No. Did someone say I was mad at you? Like, why are you asking me that question?" And they said, "Well, you know, about 2.5 months ago, you passed me in the hall and you didn't say hi to me. And so I just wondered maybe if you were mad at me for some reason." And my first thought was, okay, you've been carrying that around for 2.5 months? Like, why wouldn't you just come to me and ask the question? Well, because that high S personality doesn't handle that direct communication like a high D personality might, right? I had a conversation with someone this morning who I said, well, just go and ask the question of the person that you need to ask it to. And they said, well, how would I do that? Like, how would I ask that question? How would I structure that conversation? And in my head, I'm thinking, I don't know, pick up the phone and just ask the question. Except that's not what this person was asking me. This person was ultimately saying, that's not a strength that I have, right? And so I need some strategies to kind of boost my confidence. I need to script it out so I can be clear about what I'm trying to accomplish and get that job done. So recognize that you have all of these strategies now in these pages, that once you get your results back and you've validated those results to know where you tend to be naturally strong and where you tend to be naturally less strong, which is not weak, by the way. It's just strong and less strong, because behavior is not right or wrong. There is no weak, right? I'm not weak with people. I'm just less strong with people than I am with results and tasks, right? So I want you to not bring any subjective judgment to the table when you're learning about behavior, because behavior is not subjective. It's all just objective. It just is what it is. The gift that understanding behavior at a deeper level tends to bring for you, the gift it delivers is first a better understanding of you, so you can be a better you and accomplish more knowing where you're strong and where you're less strong. And then as you get better and better at it, starting to recognize who it is that's on the other side of you so that you can adapt yourself, right? If you're a D or an I, well, you tend to be a fast talker. If you're talking to an S or a C, and the S or the C is a much slower paced person, if you don't make adjustments, you end up coming across looking slick, right? Because you're that fast talker or that smooth operator, right? And so you have to make sure that you're mirror and matching, and the part of the way you mirror and match is start to recognize some of these traits in other people. Guys, we are out of time, so I'm going to end there. I hope that this was helpful to you and what you were looking for. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you at 4:30, or I might see you on the 2 o'clock Zoom call with Gene Rivers.